Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the City of San Carlos City Council's successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency Housing Authority regular meeting of January 8th, 2018. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Any changes to the order of the agenda?
None from staff this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody on the dais want to change anything? All right. Item 4A, presentation, San Carlos Library Annual Report by Alexandria Garcia. Hi, Alexandria. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for having me this evening. I am pleased to present the San Mateo County Library's annual report for fiscal year 2016-2017. The report highlights the dynamic ways the library continues to enrich the community and provide innovative services. The San Mateo County Library is comprised of 11 member cities as well as unincorporated areas of the county. We have 12 branches of this library system that we call our community libraries. Here in San Carlos, our library falls in the top quarter of the largest libraries in the system, which can be felt when you walk through our doors and see the amount of bustling activity with adults receiving computer and ebook help, children singing songs and reading stories, and the amount of customers browsing our new books and DVDs. An exciting system-wide accomplishment that happened this year in the San Mateo County Libraries is we received the prestigious 2017 John Cotton Dana Award. This recognition is for a rebranding campaign, Open for Exploration, which unified our family of 12 community libraries into a shared vision and brand. This has resulted in substantially increasing our amount of library card applications and our website visits. And our highly successful past year serving the San Carlos community included circulating over 400,000 items, and this includes books, films, music, audiobooks, ukuleles, hotspots, bicycle locks, welcoming more than 320,000 visitors into our doors, and in sharing inspiring programs with over 40,000 attendees. I would like to take a moment and highlight our programming, which uniquely sets us apart. At San Mateo County Libraries, we believe in exploration, discovering, and igniting growth. When you come to our programs at our library, we don't want you to feel like a passive user, but we want you to feel part of the creation and to be engaged. We focus on on-process programming where we don't have a template or an example, but give the tools to create a project and let you take control of the end result. Research shows the benefits, particularly in children, to this open-ended discovery and the strength of learning through play. Every Monday and Wednesday, we offer these types of open-ended craft programs to 70-plus attendees. In January 2017, we hosted a 3D printing fair where we brought in multiple 3D printers and taught kids and adults how to design their own creations and print them at the library. This January, on the 20th, we will be hosting a huge STEM fair and partnering with community organizations like the Hiller Aviation Museum, who will be bringing a flight simulator to make for an incredible event. Another goal we are committed to is spotting opportunities to deliver services outside our physical building. During the 16-17 fiscal year, we launched rotating book bikes, and these are basically pedal-powered, this always gets me, pedal-powered mini libraries, and so on top of them they have books, media, 3D printers, musical instruments, and we ride them around the community. We are grateful to the Friends of the San Carlos Library who have funded our community bike, and then we have a permanent one at San Carlos. In San Carlos, you have likely spotted us delivering pedal-powered, equitable access to popular community spaces like parks, farmers markets, and local schools. We are looking forward to drier weather to continue making our rounds. Lastly, a constant goal is engaging children and families in high-quality, research-based experiences. We do this on a daily basis, but would like to highlight our most successful summer yet. This past summer, our Summer Learning Challenge was our highest program that we've had. We had over 6,300 free books that were handed out to children, teens, and adults, and we inspired the community with 300 active hours of learning and helped to close the summer slide. The San Carlos Library is indebted to our many volunteers who have contributed over 7,000 hours of their time to our library and to our community. It is also through the continuing commitment of the Friends of the San Carlos Library and their fundraising efforts that we continue to offer such a vast quantity of quality programming. We look forward to another year of feeling the expansion of knowledge, experiences, and community engagement, and we are so thankful for your support. I would like to welcome any comments and questions you may have.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's great. Mr. Johnson?
Thanks, Sally, for the presentation. I think, San Carlos is very lucky to be part of the San Mateo County library system. It's a great system. I'm privileged to serve on the board. The library system has been recognized with lots of awards, and from everything that I can tell as a board member, it's an exceptionally well-run organization that continues to meet its goals. I just wanted to say, thank you and commend you. I know, how long has it been now? Has it been a full year as librarian? Or?
It has. It was officially a year at the end of November. So it's been a really great experience, and I think this community is a huge part of it.
And I personally think you're off to a great start. I know you've been out in the community a lot. You've been at the farmers market. You've been trying to get some community forums started up at the library. And so personally, I really appreciate all the creativity and enthusiasm, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Mr. Olbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Allie. Great presentation, as Cameron said. I also just want to echo what Cameron had mentioned as well, because I think that you've brought a level of creativity to your job that will stand everybody in good stead. And I particularly want to commend you for the civic outreach stuff you're doing, where you're encouraging groups to come forward and have discussions and bring experts in to talk about various things, because libraries are about educating people, and it's not always out of books. So I'm glad to see that done, and I hope you continue to do it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alexandria.
Perfect.
Appreciate your time and all your hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is public comment. And I have 2 cards. Is that right? These, okay. So these are for items not on the posted agenda, and we usually allow 2 minutes for that. The first one is Richard Crone.
Thank you. My name is Richard Crone.
Thanks.
And I'm a resident of San Carlos and a member of Save San Carlos Parks, a citywide group of concerned citizens. The city of San Carlos spent over $100,000 in legal fees to settle a lawsuit with a binding agreement with Save San Carlos Parks in September of 2010 regarding the removal of natural grass and the installation of synthetic turf at Highlands Park. A key provision of our compromise was the city's acknowledgement of the toxic health risks of using waste crumb rubber from ground-up old tires at Highlands Park. I want to call to your attention a violation of our legal agreement. On Tuesday, December 12, 2017 in the morning, I witnessed personally and took the photos before you, documenting the installation of toxic tire waste and toxic resin in Highlands Park in the children's play area. What's even more disturbing is that the workers were combining the waste rubber with a toxin resin known as Voramer MR1165, an isocyanate from Dow Chemical. Please note that the manufacturer's own warnings before you show the health risks from with these toxins, which I would contend are magnified when you consider that it's in a play area for young children. See also the photos. It confirmed, and my conversation with the contractor confirmed that nothing was done to prevent the residual toxins from leaching into the groundwater and runoff into the bay. Something happening right now as it rains outside. We urge the council to question the flagrant disregard of our agreement by city management. We can clearly see that these same underhanded and questionable practices now being exhibited by the city in the pursuit of lights at the stadium field, which was deliberately protected 7 years ago as an unlighted natural grass field in our agreement for Highlands Park. Save San Carlos Parks is prepared to fight with every legal means possible. We request an immediate cease and desist action, the removal of the toxic resins and tire waste in Highlands Park, and that the council initiate tonight by stopping the wasteful and devious pursuit of lights at Stadium Field, as agreed in 2010. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Crone. Amy, would you please look into that and get back to us in our next meeting, please? I'd appreciate that. Our next speaker is Heidi Liebengroth.
Hello, good evening, Council. I'm Heidi Liebenguth, also a resident of San Carlos. The proposal to put lights at Stadium Field in Highlands Park is disingenuous in either its short-sightedness or actual dishonesty. This is an issue that the city resolved over 7 years ago when it settled after 7 years of argument and a community group lawsuit to preserve Stadium Field as a daytime use only natural grass field and make Lower Highlands Park a lighted field with artificial turf using cork and coconut husk for infill. If the city were to install field lighting, the natural grass surely would not hold up to the additional hours of heavy use every night. This project doesn't make sense on its own, and the city would never install field lighting without also intending to install artificial turf. Since this clearly is the intent, the EIR is completely inadequate and even dishonest in not considering the full impact of this proposal. You're seeing the effects of another faulty EIR in the use of toxic materials in the new children's playground. The city is wasting our tax money on this spurious EIR. When we attended and spoke at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting last month, the commissioners agreed that an EIR for lights alone at Stadium made no sense, and that the numerous problems with night use of the field combined with the heavy use of Lower Highlands would create negative impacts not considered in the EIR. Furthermore, they voiced their frustration that despite their hard work and extreme time commitment to the Parks and Rec Commission, their concerns and priorities often fall on deaf ears at the city. Instead of ignoring the values, priorities, and concerns of our citizens, including these dedicated volunteers on our commissions, the city should be seeking and pursuing every option to acquire and create additional recreational and parkland facilities. Save San Carlos Parks, along with many other community groups, has been advocating for more parkland for at least the 14 years when artificial turf was first proposed for Highlands Park at an upfront cost of $2 million and more. Now that there is funding available from PG&E as well as private donors, the council needs to take a leadership role in acquiring additional park space. This is especially urgent, given the dramatic increase in population we will see this year when the many apartments and condominiums under construction are filled with young professionals and families. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So, Mr. Maltby, could we have a report on that perhaps by next time also, on the speaker's comments?
Sure thing.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to speak on items not on the posted agenda? All right, moving on. Item 6 is consent calendar. Consent calendar items are usually done by one motion. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve City Council consent calendar items A through L and successor agency to the redevelopment agency consent calendar item M, and adopt ordinance number 1529, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending ordinance 1521 for the planned development PD zoning district and approving the associated planned development plan and the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration for the revised Hilton Garden Inn Hotel project at 1091 Industrial Road, APN 046-151-060, to allow for an increase of 11 hotel rooms without adding to the height, bulk, or mass of the building. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion on any of this? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right. Moving on, item 7A, public hearing, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the amendment of the general plan policy, PR-policy 3.7, to allow adult use of the youth center and adopting updates to the youth center use policy.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the community here tonight. To provide a brief background and introduction to this agenda item, last February, City Council adopted the current strategic plan and work plans. A task was identified to maximize the use of the youth center and adult community center. As part of this work plan item is the consideration to amend the general plan policy PR-3.7 to expand the opportunities for members of the community to use the youth center during non-youth program times. In your typical week or month at the youth center, you may see a variety of activities taking place, including our after-school drop-in program, which takes place on all school days, Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. and Wednesdays from 1 to 6 p.m., and on school breaks from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Youth special events including Friday night dances or kids' night out events, and general special interest classes including music, art, gymnastics, and cooking for youth. You can also we also have weekend family gym time on Sundays where families are welcome to come in and play a sport of their choice and just enjoy the gym. As established in the Youth Center Use Policy, which is adopted by City Council, youth use would be the priority of scheduled activities in the Youth Center and would remain the priority moving forward. As identified in the Use Policy, priority allocations are categorized into 4 groups. The first priority being youth and family programs administered or co-sponsored by the city or the Parks and Recreation Department. Second priority are resident nonprofit youth organizations, such as youth sport organizations including AYSO, Little League, and youth sports club teams. The third priority of use would be adult programs administered or co-sponsored by the city or Parks and Recreation Department. And the last priority would be resident and non-resident private rentals. All future potential expansion of youth programs would take priority over adult programs. Some of the possible future programming could include morning adult yoga and fitness classes. There would also be the opportunity for morning or midday drop-in sports such as basketball, pickleball, or indoor soccer, and evening classes and lectures. Last year, this policy amendment was discussed at the Youth Advisory Council meeting, and the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission voted in favor of the policy amendment. Most recently, a public hearing was held at the Planning Commission. For both commission meetings, notices were sent out to property owners and residents within 300 feet of the Youth Center and Burton Park. At the Planning Commission in November, we held a public hearing for the amendment of General Plan Policy PR-3.7. Additional recommendations were made by the Planning Commission to clarify the language in the Youth Center Use Policy to be more specific of the protected youth hours where adult programming would not occur. One recommendation the Planning Commission made, which was not included in the resolution, pertains to the revenue generated from the adult programming being held in a restricted fund to use for Youth Center facility maintenance. This was left off as staff wanted to leave the authority of the financial decisions to the City Council. The action before City Council tonight is whether or not to approve an amendment to the General Plan Policy PR-3.7 to read, protect the youth center as a valuable venue primarily for youth activities and programs with priorities defined in the Youth Center Use Policy as adopted by City Council, and thus adopting the updates to the Youth Center Use Policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Mr. Olbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Amy. Nice presentation, as always. I had Three questions. Let me start with the simplest one, which I thought of as you were describing potential future uses. And I have to apologize because I do not remember, I'm not sure I remember the name of the group that does this exercise. I think it's Tai Chi. There's a group that tends to meet. And I remember one of their members contacting me years ago looking to get some space inside someplace to do that. Is that something that potentially could be done in the morning, could be accommodated in the morning here?
It definitely could. I know that Tai Chi is very popular. We have a few classes throughout the week between our department and actually the library. And so they're actually kind of outgrowing their space currently, and the gym would be a great facility for them to use.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you're on top of that because, as I said, it was a request that I was never able to do anything about. So if you can, that's great. The other two questions I have, you and I met with several other staff members to talk about protocols for interaction between adults and children, basically sparked by the unfortunate situation that happened at the school district after-school program up in Britton Acres not too long ago. And I don't want to recap that entire meeting, but I think the public would be interested in getting a sense, first off, of just in general, what are your current protocols that you use for ensuring safety of children when you have young children and adults interacting together, as you have to have, because you can't let the kids run around free in the youth center?
Sure. In the morning time when we have our talk classes, they're all accompanied by either their parents or caregivers. We do have 3 full-time staff in the building at this time and 1 part-time staff in the mornings who helps kind of get our morning parent and taught classes going. When it turns to after school, all of our youth center part-time recreation leaders come on board. We typically have anywhere from 6 to 8 part-time staff as recreation leaders for the after-school program, we also have then a program coordinator. So there's anywhere between 7 to 9 staff typically that are dedicated for the after-school program. So they ensure the safety of the kids at that time.
And you do things such as making sure that no adult is ever alone by themselves with children?
Yes.
No, there's there's 2 adults at a time at a minimum.
Correct.
Okay. And last question, thank you. I think that's important, and I just want, mostly for the record, for people to understand that you have been thinking about this and working it. The other question I have is, since we're now talking about a situation where we will be allowing a larger number of adults in and for a period of time and then transitioning back to having kids in there, have you thought through, or are you thinking through protocols of making sure that the adults are out of the building? Sort of the same thing from a safety point of view.
Correct. So that just goes with the scheduling. So we'll have set hours where we schedule the adult activities that are outside of the already youth schedule. And as I mentioned in the presentation, if there's ever any potential additional programming for youth, that would then be the priority over any adult programming. So there would take a season or so to transition that. But there's going to be some set parameters on the times where we schedule these adult activities that wouldn't interfere with the youth programs.
And staff will make sure, I hate to say it by doing building sweeps and stuff, but staff will make sure that
part of our
it is fully
daily routine.
transitioned from one state to the other.
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
that's part of our
good.
daily routine.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions by anyone on the council? Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice presentation, Amy. Thank you. Really, just a couple. You mentioned that there would be this transition between the time that the kids use it and the time the adults use it. Is it 15 minutes? Is it a half an hour? Is it any particular length of time, or does it depend on the activity?
It'll be about 30 minutes right now is what we're thinking.
Is that because things have to be rearranged or different things set up?
Yep, set up. Yeah, break down and set up.
Forgive me if I didn't see it in here. I was looking for it earlier when I was looking at the packet. But what's the impact of parking since adults are going to be using it? They're going to be driving cars there. How was that looked at?
Laura's going to come up and talk a little bit about the environmental review we did.
Hi, good evening. Laura Russell, Senior Planner. I've been working with Amy in regards to kind of the more technical aspects of the planning review as well as the CEQA review. And we worked with our CEQA consultant as well as staff from Greg Rubin's office to look at the potential impacts under CEQA. So we did take a look at the number of parking spaces and when the adult activities are anticipated to take place. And those adult activities take place out of kind of the peak hours in terms of traffic and transportation analysis under CEQA. So there's not a traffic or transportation impact under CEQA from a technical point of view. CEQA doesn't take into consideration sometimes, the exact number of parking spaces and how the CEQA impacts are evaluated. So there's kind of a real life component of that as well. But there's not a parking or transportation impact under CEQA.
Thank you. I don't know who else answers this. I didn't see anything about the potential for new revenue that's going to be generated from adult activities. Do we have an idea what that might be?
We don't have an exact number at this time, but could, once we kind of move forward in the new programming, which most likely wouldn't occur until fall with the upcoming youth center renovation, we would have a better idea.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, I have one speaker card. Vera Lindenberg.
I think everybody knows me. I'm Vera Lindenberg. I've lived all my life in San Carlos, went to every school here. I told one kid, I went to White Oaks. The kid looked at me and said, really? When? And so I'm really very familiar with San Carlos, and you know that I'm the founder of the Youth Center. And Ron Collins was a very big part of the beginning of our the organization of the Youth Center. Whoever thought that it would be so beautiful? We fought for a full-size gymnasium. That was a tearful event because I wanted a full-size gymnasium, and they said, "But Vera, do you know how much that's going to cost?" And I said, "Well, just raise more money." And so, Ron, thank you for all the hard work that you put into it, and Bob, thank you. You've been on my steering committee. I'm on my 7th board now. I can't leave because I seem to be the spark that keeps this going. It's very, very important that we keep this as a youth center. I think that the money that's going to be generated if the men play basketball at night will go towards a fund that will be a maintenance fund, which I'm not against. I think that'll be great. When we built the youth center and gave it to the city, and we didn't have to do that, but I didn't want to run it, so we did have to do it. So I had to let this child go and grow up, and now it's growing up. But we want to make sure that something is put into place where the adults are not in the youth center at the same time that the kids are in the youth center, because the whole purpose of this youth center was to find a place to keep kids safe. And one of the reasons I did it is because I had a couple wild children. And I thought if they had a place to go after school, they might not have been so wild. And I think that's what's happening. Kids go there now and they do their homework, and where am I going to go after school? They're going to go to the youth center. And the youth center is a safe place for them. So please do everything you can to keep that. I hope Amy will do that so that the kids don't feel threatened by the adults in any way. And you too, Jeff. Thank you. I want you to know that this is the only youth center like this in the entire state. Mike Garvey did a lot of research on that. Mike Garvey, our ex-city manager. It was the only one like it, and that's why our government gave us $800,000 because I told them that was the only one like it in the whole state of California. And I want you to be proud of it. Please keep it. Do something to keep it so it's a youth center and not a community center. Please do whatever you can to make that happen. As far as the parking is concerned, that is a problem. Think about it later. On the EIR, we only got approval of the EIR was because we said the kids don't drive. And so that's how we got the approval. But I don't know if you'll have a new EIR. Do you have to have a new EIR to make this happen?
No. Or,
Already doing that? Yeah. So that's my concern. I think you will have a problem. This is fine. This is the way we do it. We keep it quiet till the night before, and then we chop down the tree. That's basically what we did, if you remember right. Bob, were you on the committee when we did that?
no, I didn't chop any trees down. No.
Anyway, thank you for keeping the youth center safe, please. I don't have another jack-in-the-box to use as a waving tool, so please keep it safe. Don't change it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Vera, very much.
Protect it, please. Okay, thank you.
I think this council, as well as the councils before us and the councils after, will realize and have realized the gem that it is. And we'll do, and as our city managers and our park and recreation directors have over the years, and I think it's going to be there for a long, long time as a testament to all the hard work that you and a lot of other people put in to make it happen. So thank you again for your support forever on this. They will. They will. This is a public hearing, and I see no more speaker cards. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
I moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Gentlemen?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I would like to move approval of the item to adopt Resolution 2018-8, but I'm going to add some language here, and we can discuss it. So 2018-8, a resolution of the council approving the amendment of the general plan policy PR 3.7 to allow adult use of the youth center and adopting updates to the youth center use policy. And here's what I'm adding is with policy procedures and scheduling to be reviewed in January of 2019 by the Parks and Rec Commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion on the floor. Discussion?
Yes. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Matt, what's the thinking behind the addendum?
The thinking behind the added language is to respect Vera and the work she put into it. And I know, the initial thing was for this to be a youth center, and I think we need to be cautious in how we approach this to be sure that, we can all have good intentions about the policies and the scheduling, but just to make sure that we don't have any conflicts, any issues with, we live in a world where we see in the paper all the time of children being abused by adults, unfortunately. So just to have a check-in time, at least with Parks and Rec, and then if there are any issues, they can recommend to the council any changes in policy that could be taken up. So it's just a cautionary measure.
Mr. Johnson?
I don't have any issue with us reviewing it in a year. And I did just want to chime in and offer my personal thanks to Vera again. I know, no, I know you weren't the only one, but I know this has been a labor of love. I know that this has been an issue that you've been apprehensive about, and I do appreciate you working with the staff. Yeah, absolutely. And as a parent, my kids are starting to take basketball lessons at the youth center. We live 3 blocks away, and we definitely appreciate it. And you've given us a great community asset, so I just want to say thank you.
Mr. Rubens, so I have a question. The amendment is to have it be reviewed by the Park and Recreation Commission. Is there any problem with that adding on to this resolution?
No, that's an appropriate addition to either the resolution or the policy to have it reviewed.
Mr. Grocott, the only point I would make is you mentioned January 2019, but as I heard Ms. Newby say, this isn't even going to start till the fall of this year. So it's only going to be going for 3 months at that time. Did you want to extend that a little?
Let's make it, the idea is for it to be operational for a year.
Okay, so operational for a year. Do we need, Ms. Rubens, a change to
how about just fall 2019?
Okay, fall 2019. Does the seconder agree with
I
that?
agree. That makes sense.
All right. Other discussion?
Well, let me just...
Yes, Mr. Collins.
chime in. I want to thank Vera because she's just been a part of this for so many years. I remember when it was being built. My only regret is that my children were beyond the age that they could make use of it when it finally happened. But nevertheless, it did happen, and we're very proud of it. So I'm happy to support this.
All right. Mr. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to echo as well, Vera, thank you for all your work in getting us to this point, but also thank you for being flexible on this. And yes, and I think you're right that there are resources generated here that'll help make it a better place for youth than would otherwise be the case. So I want to recognize both your good work and also the fact that you're not just staying with what was there before. So thank you.
All right, so does everyone understand the motion? All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, thank you very much. Thanks, Vera. Appreciate it. All right, item A, new business. Consideration of adopting a resolution of the successor agency to the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency approving the issuance of bonds to refund certain outstanding bonds of the former redevelopment agency, approving the execution and delivery of an indenture of trust, and providing for other matters properly relating thereto. I wonder if an attorney wrote any of this.
Al's been studying law at night.
I didn't know you studied law at night.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. We have to be fluent in law as a city planner. Staff has been working with our financial advisor, NHA Advisors, to analyze and evaluate the refinancing opportunity for the agency's outstanding bonds. Since the elimination of redevelopment agencies, the state has allowed for refinancing, allowing a successor agency to issue bonds provided that certain factors are met. Based on analysis by various financial institutions and reviewed by NHA, there is a sufficient interest rate savings to justify beginning the process for issuing refunding bonds. By approving the resolution that is before you this evening, the successor agency would authorize approval of the form of the indenture of trust, which is essentially the document that sets forth the terms and conditions for the bond refunding in the transaction. As part of the approval, the successor agency would also approve the financing team, and the financing team is recommended to consist of NHA Advisors, Jones Hall, which would be the legal counsel, and Hilltop Securities, which would be the placement agent and underwriter, and RSG would also be involved in analytics and forecasting. It's anticipated that with successor agency approval of the resolution, the closing of the 2018 refinancing would be completed in about April of 2018. And there are multiple steps involved in refinancing or doing this bond refunding. And Eric Scriven of NHA Advisors is here this evening, and he's going to walk you through this presentation about the estimated savings, the timeline, and a little bit about the financing team. We also have Jim Simon with RSG here this evening, and James Wozniak, our legal counsel that's recommended on this financing team as well, and we'll be available to answer any questions of the mayor or council. I'm going to ask Eric to come on up.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I think he covered most of it just now, but
okay,
there's a few details. There you go. Glad to keep it brief. We'll go through a few pages. You have about $11.5 million of bonds outstanding, and they're at a higher interest rate than what is in the market right now. So you can save about $100,000 per year in the current marketplace. Right now, the market is extremely strong. So we're hoping it is a lengthy process because we have to apply to get it approved by Department of Finance. So now is not when we're going to sell the bonds. It'll be in a few months. So interest rates on the existing bonds are about 4 3/4, and the current marketplace is in the low 3s. Some would say it's in the high 2s. When you account for all the costs, it's about 3%. So there is a good spread there. There's savings on $11.5 million. It's worth looking at and conducting the process. The bonds are looking at a big savings, about $100,000 per year. That equates, the industry standard is you calculate that back in net present value it, and that equates to about 10.5% NPV, which is a very strong refinancing. Again, that's right now. We don't know what the market's going to look like in 3-4 months, but it's worth looking at and making happen. So I'm on page 4. Oh, sorry about that. The point is that the savings go to all of the taxing entities, including the city. The city has a pretty good percentage compared to a lot of cities that we work with that refinance tax allocation bonds. Jim Simon is doing the residual analysis, but it looks to be about $30,000 to $35,000 right now per year through the end of the bond issue that the city would collect in additional revenues. The other taxing entities like the school districts, which really they don't get the money. The state takes all the money that the schools save. Other smaller special districts get the remaining savings. We've provided sources and uses on page 5, and you can see that it's about $100,000 per year savings. The final maturity cannot be extended. That's one of the rules when you refinance tax allocation bonds, so that's going to remain the same. There's different ways you can take those savings, but usually the way to do it is to take them uniformly over the remaining life. So page 6. The timeline that we have, as was noted by Al, was we began hiring the team last month. Here we are tonight for approval of the bond documents. The Oversight Board gets to look at the transaction and approve the successor agency's approval, if you will. And at that point, we put forth an application to the Department of Finance. They have 60 days to review and approve. Once they do that, we can go to market. Between now and that period of time, we're going to work with the team, primarily the broker-dealer, Hilltop Securities, to determine which is the best method for sale, either a public offering or a private placement. And if it's a public offering, we would be coming back to the successor agency for an approval of a disclosure document, which is a preliminary official statement. If everything goes well and the market holds and the savings are adequate for staff to approve the transaction at the time of sale, we're looking at closing the transaction in April, like mid to late April. Al was kind enough to introduce our firm. Jones Hall is here and happy to answer questions on the legal documents. Jim Simon with RSG is here. The placement agent, Hilltop Securities, is not here, but if there's any market questions, I'll do my best to answer those. And we're still determining who's going to be the trustee on the transaction. We'll probably do a RFP for that. So if there are any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Olbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure exactly which person my questions are addressed to, so you guys can figure that out and put the appropriate person up there to respond. First and foremost, I want to make sure I understand exactly what it is that we are approving here tonight and effectively what we are delegating. Because my reading of the documents is that if we approve this tonight, then we're granting I guess it's a combination of staff and the successor agency board, the opportunity to make the final call on, okay, that interest rate looks good enough, but that one would not be. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what you're doing. You're delegating staff, namely the executive director, to determine, and the finance director to determine if the savings are adequate at the time of interest rates being presented. That would have to, you cannot execute the transaction until the DOF has approved the transaction. But the successor agency board is welcome to set parameters if that's your prerogative to do that. But you know, there is some delegation here, because if the market, particularly if it is determined that a private placement is the best option and there's a volatile market, there may be an opportunity to lock it in at no risk to the agency during that 60-day period that DOF is reviewing. So the answer is yes. You are delegating the authority, particularly if it's a private placement.
Okay, thank you. That's what I had thought. But so effectively, stop me if I'm wrong, I mean, I presume staff is not going to ever do something that would be economically disadvantageous to the city, but it might not be anywhere near as advantageous as what we think now, because market conditions, as you've said several times, can shift.
Absolutely. Well, as your municipal advisor, I wouldn't recommend something that isn't advantageous either. There are certain parameters in the marketplace that are sort of rules of thumb, and I think it was noted, or it's noted in the debt management policy that you approved. 3 to 5% is sort of the NPV range of savings. Anything below 3%, you really have to have a good reason to do it. Maybe you're going to restructure debt or something of that nature. Anything above 5%, the rule of thumb in the marketplace is probably should have a good reason why you wouldn't do it. That's a pretty good, healthy amount of savings. Right now, we're sitting at 10% NPV savings, so it's really well in the money, but the market could change. And if we get in that gray zone between 3 and 5%, just because the market deteriorated, that becomes a question mark.
Which actually is a good transition into my next question, which is, as the expert here, what, if any, trend have you seen an impact from the recently passed massive revision of the U.S. federal tax code?
Right. Well, there's a couple things going on there. There was a massive effort to close a lot of bond transactions in December, which created a lack of supply, if you will. There's very few deals that are happening currently. That may change in the next several months. So that's helpful for selling debt out there. There's more buyers than sellers, so that could be very favorable. But as far as the tax reform increase in federal tax marginal rates, that we're seeing that the banks, particularly on the private placement side, they're reevaluating their levels that they need to make a profit on buying, because they've been very strong buyers of municipal debt generally and tax allocation bonds.
I presume because essentially in the lower tax environment, it's not as valuable to own tax-exempt bonds.
Right.
Right. Okay. So potentially the 10% could drop off over time, and you certainly warned us about that. The other question I have, which is a more general one, this is focusing on the successor agency debt through the redevelopment agency. Has staff looked at any other debt that we may have? I'm embarrassed to admit I don't necessarily know what those debt issuances might be, but have we looked at other opportunities?
How much? I don't know that you have much debt out there, really. Actually,
I'm not sure we do either.
Which is a very good thing. I think that's.
Well, we'll have Rebecca come up and tell us, or Jim will come up and tell us how much debt we have.
Or they both can come up and tell us. They can fight over the numbers. Thank you, Rebecca.
Good evening. We have a general obligation debt, which we just recently refinanced, I believe, a couple of years ago. So, yeah, the library.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all we have?
Yeah.
Good.
And we don't have a lot of debt.
Just have a lot of unfunded
and so that wouldn't be much of an opportunity because it was just recently refinanced.
Done in 2015.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just had one question. Maybe Jim, I know you did the net present value at 10. It came out about 10%. If the Fed raises the rates once, and it might in the next 3 months, is that? I mean, I know you haven't run the numbers, but is there any ball? And I'm not going to hold you to it, but is there a ballpark estimate of what that would do to it? Okay. Again, they're going to raise it a quarter. They planned on, at least they talked about raising it 3 times or maybe 4 times. So I'm assuming in the first quarter they're going to do it once. Maybe they're not.
That's the consensus. Bloomberg says they're going to do 2, 3, or 4 times.
Right.
They're changing that, but it's pretty well assumed that March or April is
Right.
going to be an increase. It's hard to say. Sometimes there's a dislocation between the federal funds rates and treasuries versus munis. Like I said before, there's not that many municipal bonds. A lot of them got pushed into 2017. So
But
we don't know where it's
it
going
could
to go.
affect it 10%. I mean, when I say 10%, 10% of the gain, you know, I mean, it's not going to cut us down halfway, just raising it another quarter point.
If I knew where interest rates were going.
Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot. All right. Any other questions? This isn't a public hearing, but is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? All right. Gentlemen, what do you want to do here?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution SA-15, a resolution of the successor agency to the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency approving the issuance of bonds to refund certain outstanding bonds of the former redevelopment agency, approving the execution and delivery of an indenture of trust, and providing for other matters properly relating thereto.
A second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you. All right, moving on, new business 8B, consideration of adopting a resolution endorsing the effort of the Citizens Climate Lobby to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Gary White, and I am the group leader of Citizens Climate Lobby for the San Mateo County chapter. We're a national organization with over 85,000 supporters, and we have chapters in about 95% of all congressional districts across the country. Let's see. One on the right? Okay. We are basically here to ask for an endorsement from the City Council of San Carlos to support our carbon fee and dividend proposal. And I know a number of you have met and spoken to a number of my colleagues here over the past number of months, and we'll get into a little bit more depth. Our mission is very, very straightforward. We're here to create the political will to provide what we feel is the most critical climate solution, which is a carbon fee and dividend, by enabling individual breakthroughs in personal and political power. A little bit more about the organization. We are international, even though we're predominantly U.S. in focus. And I mentioned over 85,000 supporters. We are nonpartisan, which is very, very unique for an environmental and climate organization. We work with both sides of the aisle, along with independents as well. We're nonprofit. We are very, very solution-focused. We like to describe ourselves as really laser-focused at this particular point on a carbon fee and dividend, which we believe is the right solution to get us toward a complete renewable energy economy. And we operate with respect. When we meet with congresspeople in Washington and in local districts, we treat everyone with respect and appreciate the work they do. In our organization, I just would want to point out Dave Britton, who's here, and Ellen Dooley, who couldn't be here, who are both San Carlos residents. They're very, very active on our steering committee. And in our San Mateo County chapter, we have 350 supporters and over 40 climate activists. So a little bit about carbon fee and dividend, if you're not familiar with it. Essentially, what we are looking for the U.S. Congress and the federal government to do is to place a fee on fossil fuels at their source, at the mine, the well, or the port. And our plan, in contrast to some other groups, is to return all of the revenue that's generated, and this is estimated to be in the billions of dollars per year, return all of the revenue to households in the U.S. in equal amounts. So it becomes, in effect, a progressive payback to individual families to help them cover any potentially additional expenses for gas, oil, etc. And what we're also looking to do is to place a border adjustment on goods so oil companies, other fossil fuel companies can't simply leave the state or leave the country and not have an equivalent price on carbon. We had a study done by a group called REMI, which was an independent organization, and they came back with some very, very interesting and compelling features. So the anticipated emissions reductions under carbon fee and dividends, CFD, within 10 years you could see 31% emissions reductions, which is very, very dramatic. And within 20 years, earlier than 2040, there would be a 50% reduction below 1990. And that is even more aggressive than the Paris Accord that the U.S. had signed up for and California law. We also found out that there are many, many jobs that we expect to be created, which effectively decouples renewable energy from economic growth. You can see here in 10 years, over 2 million new jobs, and in 20 years, 2.8 million new jobs. That's nationally. Likely GDP growth as well. We expect there to be tremendous growth in the economy, 70 to 85 billion per year, and 1.3 trillion within 20 years. And also very importantly, which is an area that is often overlooked in the climate discussion, is the health of our citizens. And it's estimated that almost 250,000 lives will be saved over 20 years by reducing carbon emissions. And we feel that that's very, very critical. And so the household dividend, the way this works, again, all of the revenue that would be collected by, let's say, the Social Security Administration would not be kept by the government. It would be sent back to families either monthly or quarterly. And the estimation within 10 years, it would be $288 per month for a family of four. And you can see it goes up to almost $400 a month in 20 years. And this would be consistent regardless of the income of the family. And I'd like to point out that one of the probably most prominent conservative Republicans still alive in the U.S., George Shultz, who's here at Stanford, who's a CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby Advisory Board member. Here's his quote supporting a carbon fee and dividend, and he and James Baker and a number of other people you might be familiar with came out with a conservative case for carbon dividend, and he and his fellow Republicans feel very, very strongly about using this particular device. Oops. Let me go back here. Now, many of you probably don't realize that even though within the Trump administration there is very, very little even acknowledgement of the problem, no less work to mitigate or adjust, our organization has helped create over the last year and a half the Climate Solutions Caucus in Congress. And as of today, we have 62 members, about 1 in 7 members of Congress who are on this caucus that get together regularly to talk about issues that impact various districts, what can be done about them, again, on adaptation and also mitigation. And I'll point out that this is kind of the Noah's Ark approach, where if a Democrat wants to join, he or she has to bring a Republican and vice versa. So we now have 31 of each party, so 31 Republicans are on this committee, which includes 4 Republican U.S. representatives in California and also 9 U.S. representatives who are Democratic here in California. And these are people from districts all over the country. And so what we're really looking to do is to receive an endorsement or a resolution from the council to join over 100 U.S. subnational government endorsements. And locally, we have an endorsement and a resolution from the San Mateo County government. We have a resolution from San Francisco, from Marin, the city of Richmond, the city of Berkeley, the city of Los Altos Hills, and many, many others elsewhere in California. It would join also hundreds of business organizations who have been endorsing both corporations and more local businesses. And probably most importantly is it would demonstrate support locally and nationally for the proposal for national action. And we are doing our best to collect endorsements and resolutions to be able to present this in our particular district to Jackie Speer, who is not yet on the Climate Caucus, who has some reservations about it given other work that she's doing. It's not really at the top of her list, and we really want to bring that to the top of her list. So I can entertain any questions, comments.
All right. Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you for your presentation. Questions? Well, I had two. First, you answered one. I was wondering where Jackie was on this, because I didn't see her. I see Anna Eshoo, but I did not see Jackie. So is she contemplating joining? Or?
Well, she is thinking about it, but her response to us has been, I've got so many other really compelling issues that she's working on with military families, women's issues, others that she doesn't want to dilute. Right. But she also says that once a bill is brought to the Congress, she's going to be one of the first to pass it, so to vote on it.
The other question I had is, you talked about on the carbon fee dividend, place a fee on fossil fuels at their source. California doesn't have that, does it?
No, we have a cap and trade program right now.
Okay.
It's very, very likely that when the national government goes to a carbon tax or a fee and dividend, it will likely supersede what we're doing here in California. Okay. But there's no carbon tax as of yet in the U.S., although Massachusetts as a state is currently considering it.
All right. Other questions? Mr. Collins?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Gary. Good presentation. Just a few questions. Can you explain to me again what a border adjustment is?
Yeah, border adjustment is one where if fossil fuel, let's say oil, crude oil, is coming into the U.S., from a country that does not have a carbon tax. There are many countries now that do. China, for instance, is one. The EU, many other countries, and Scandinavia as well. But where the countries don't have a local carbon tax, we would tax that particular fossil fuel as it comes in to the country, because anything that's mined or that's drilled for here in the country would be taxed as well.
Okay. And then what's the impact on the energy industry? Basically, first and foremost, the financial impact. Is there something that they're going to be paying more fees in many cases? What do they do to offset that?
Well, it's really, let me explain. It's very, very interesting because more and more energy companies are actually coming to support this proposal, primarily because they sense and they anticipate that there will be a particular tax on carbon at some point in the near term, if not the longer term. And so what they want to do is get on board and lock in a particular price. What we're talking about is $15 per ton of emissions the first year. It would go up a few dollars each successive year. But in other countries, the amount has started at 45, 60, even more aggressively. So they're interested in getting it locked in lower.
Okay. And then you had one of your, maybe you could bring that one back up, about the jobs produced. Yeah, there it is. Whenever I get in discussions with people and we talk about, particularly about energy issues and other issues that, have a political bent to them, when people cite statistics, sometimes those statistics are questioned and they question the organizations that put together the statistics. So Where do these numbers come from? Who does the compiling of these numbers?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, there's a market research organization called REMI, or EMI, that does financial and economic analysis. And they ran the numbers based on jobs that have already been created in the solar and the wind industry, et cetera. And they extrapolated out. And apparently they are a reputable firm. Other organizations have used them. They don't have a political bent that we know of. So we feel confident that they're providing good data.
All right. And then you mentioned these dividends that would be coming to the family. Would they be coming in the literally in the form of a check?
Yeah. The thinking now is that, as I said, the money would be collected by the Social Security Administration. They're very, very good and efficient at giving out money. So we're recommending that it be used that way, but that any surplus or any percent not be kept, except for maybe a very, very small operating budget to be able to get this done, but that all of that income be divided by literally every citizen in the U.S. and families. And this is the estimation of how much would be as the carbon fee starts to ramp up.
All right. Thank you.
I have one last question. Are there any other cities that have approved this so far? You said the county. Any other cities in the peninsula?
As I mentioned, Los Altos Hills.
I guess in our county, San Mateo County.
In our county, we are working aggressively to try to get, right now, we're in conversation with Belmont, Redwood City, San Mateo City, and also Millbrae, but we have not got those yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, this is not a public hearing, but is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? All right. Gentlemen, what do you want to do here?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we adopt Resolution 2018-9, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos endorsing the effort of the Citizens Climate Lobby to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. I see a light here. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment. I appreciate the group who came forward and made this suggestion. Whenever we get involved in endorsing state or federal legislation, it can be pretty tricky because there's a million different issues, there's a million different bills, and everybody wants the city to get involved. And so I had to think kind of long and hard about where I would come down on this. And ultimately, I kind of made up about sort of 5 criteria for myself. First, is this an issue that faces San Carlos? And clearly climate change does, and sea level rise in particular. Second, is this an issue that we are currently working on? And we have a climate action plan, and we've been involved with setting up Peninsula Clean Energy. Third, is the policy that is being asked for us to endorse consistent with past actions that we've taken? And I think the bipartisan nature of this legislation is consistent with things that we've done. Fourth, was this initiated by actual residents as opposed to a group? And in this case, residents who have a good reputation of being involved in the community reached out and said this was important to them. And then finally, did it raise significant opposition? And I did not receive any correspondence, and there hasn't been anyone here tonight who's spoken on this. So because of those things, I'm comfortable supporting it, but I would say that there has to be a pretty high bar for us to take a position on legislation that isn't directly under our purview. So I just wanted to state that for the record, and I'm happy to support it.
Okay, Mr. Olbert.
Yes, thank you. I too want to thank the local residents who brought this forward. It's a very clever idea. But I also want to particularly thank you folks for being flexible about the way the resolution is worded, because as Cameron was saying, these are very complex issues, and any solution starts with coming up with ideas, and normally you need a whole bunch of really clever ideas before you settle on one or design one that actually looks like it'll work. And so being flexible about saying it really needs to be evaluated, but not sort of insistent that this is the only way to the truth is very important to me, and I admire you for being willing to do that. And I'll just say at the end that a little bit of a counterpoint to something that Cameron said, who knows, maybe one of these days the City Council will endorse other resolutions of matters of public interest too.
Mr. Grocott.
Well, first I want to respect Cameron's position that he raised about us dealing with issues that don't have to do with, local things like taking care of the roads and fire departments and police departments and sewers and garbage rates and all the things that we're elected to do. I'm very reluctant to get involved in things that endorse issues that are either at a state level or a national level. I don't have his bullet points to go through myself. He used the word consistent, though, and I am going to stay consistent in that I've said numerous times when these kind of issues come up that, to me, having a clean environment is an important thing. But I feel like being honest about it is an important thing, too. And I'm not judging anybody else's position by saying this, but for me, looking at the data, looking at things I read, and scientists on both sides of the issue of global warming, I just don't see it. If we were talking about, cleaning up the air for the sake of having clean air, and as I've said before, when I'm out riding my bicycle and I pull up behind a vehicle, if it's a 55 Chevy, I know it. Especially if it hasn't been, put a new engine in it and drivetrain and all that. So if it's running on an older system, you know the difference. And it's not pleasant. But I wish we could approach this issue in a way that I would find honest, which is to say, really what we're trying to do is clean up the air, clean up the water, and forget all this stuff about global warming. I will note that it was, I think 9 years ago, well, it was December 2008, where Mr. Gore, former vice president, gave a speech to a German audience and predicted at that time that the entire North Pole ice cap would be completely ice-free in 5 years. And here we sit, and that hasn't happened. And yet that was the alarm that got a lot of this started. And so all of that makes me very uncomfortable with endorsing something like this, and I just cannot do it.
Okay. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I'm going to support this is because it doesn't really matter to me whether you call this something that is going to combat climate change or pollution or whatever. I've thought for a long time that if the argument all along, as Matt sort of referred to, had been pollution, we would have probably more support. But as far as I know, carbon emissions are the leading cause of pollution and the leading cause of climate change. So they're actually one and the same. I don't see that this particular resolution or this particular approach has any downside. It doesn't really bother me that Mr. Gore might have been wrong. Maybe he was wrong by a few years. But the risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of doing something. And if we do this, I don't see the downside of it, especially when you're going to have jobs created, businesses benefit from it, and more people's lives saved. So I do see it, and I do support it.
As Mr. Johnson indicated, we normally don't do state or federal things. I know that's always been sort of my mantra, too. However, two things, I didn't have four, but two, Peninsula Clean Energy, of which we're a part of a membership of. And the other thing that got my attention was the bipartisan support from some of the Congress people whose names I recognize, who are not exactly liberal, like Peter King and Darrell Issa, to name a couple. That was very interesting to me. So, like I said, I normally don't, as Mr. Grocott said, I don't normally support these things, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception. So, which obviously it's an important issue. Not ever denigrating that it's not important issues that have come before us, but I tend to agree that we are a local body as opposed to a general body of the state. All right. No other comments, and the roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Griselli?
Yes. All right. Good luck. Get some more people from the county. All right. Moving on. 8C, consideration of appointments to the City Council subcommittees and ad hoc committees for 2018. Do we have a report for that, Mr. Malpe?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Jeff Malpe, City Manager. As the Council is aware, every year after the Council reorganizes itself in December, the staff sends out an email to Council members to check in with them to see if there's any committee assignment changes that they'd either like to have made to their existing calendar of responsibilities, or any new responsibilities they'd be interested in taking on. This year we actually did not receive any comments back from council, so we provided that information to the mayor, who I believe has simply put all the existing assignments back on with one exception, and that's the website subcommittee, whose work is completed. So that one's coming off the list. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Gee, that's the one I wanted to be on, too. Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, post the staff request for feedback coming out, was thinking about this on and off, I think, as people remember from last year. I'd actually like to ask if it's possible for me to be the representative on the Silicon Valley Clean Water Board. That's something I've always had an interest in. I've spent a certain amount of time over the years on issues, talking with Dan Childs and whatnot, and no reflection whatsoever on the sterling work that the mayor has done over the years on this, but it is an interest in one I've expressed before, so I'd like to express it again.
Okay. What's the process, Mr. Rubens, for approving or disapproving or moving or whatever? Is it all on me?
Well, I think traditionally, and Jeff can correct me if I'm misrecollecting this, is the mayor makes these selections and then seeks approval by the council as a whole. So it's your discretion to make the suggestions, and then you've, under our policies, and then you ask, traditionally the mayor has asked the council to approve his or her selections.
Okay, and so if I decide that halfway through the year, because this is probably going to be my last year, can I change it during the year, or?
Yeah, yes, you can change it at any time.
All right. Well, Mr. Olbert, to be quite honest, I think I'd like to go the first couple of months and then have a transition possibly later in the year, because I'm not going to be here next year and you will be, so if that's appropriate.
It's whatever we decide to do is fine. It's not that strong a request. I'm fine having you stay on it for the entire year, because
okay.
that's
right,
really what you want to do.
Make sure you have continuity. Well, right now, why don't we approve it the way it is, and then we'll see where we're going to go.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Through the chair. A comment I have is that I'm not sure when this was changed, but traditionally, I think is maybe the right word, Airport Roundtable, whoever was on the Airport Roundtable, both the lead and the sub, has been also on the Airport Land Use Committee, and I think that's because there's sometimes overlapping agenda items and issues that come up between the two, but currently we have it that I'm on Airport Roundtable, you're the backup, and then the land use is Mr. Collins and Mr. Olbert?
Mr. Johnson.
Or Mr. Johnson.
Okay.
So, man, I'm happy to give the Airport Land Use Committee over to you.
Not necessarily looking for that.
I think he was looking for the other way around.
I know.
You know, I have to tell you, I think traditionally you might be right, but to be quite honest, these committees are, how can I put this politely? I think it's probably
move a stone here and not
probably
have
a good idea that we'll all get to share in the misery. I mean, not the misery, but the ability to go to these, the honor. That's it, the honor to go to these. I mean, otherwise, I'd agree with you.
Right.
But otherwise, two of us are going to get lifted with a couple of ones that aren't going to necessarily work. Yes.
I apologize. All levity aside, I am actually willing to take on the Airport Roundtable in Matt's place if that's if that's the wish.
Sure.
So I would move into second position, but if you can't make it.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Behind Ron? Okay.
All right, so we'll move Mr. Collins to Airport Roundtable, and then Mr. Grocott will be the substitute for that, and I'll be off.
Mr. Mayor, I realized I forgot there was one other thing I wanted to mention.
Sure.
Currently, I'm a representative from the council to CCAG, and actually, I had never seen this on the list before, but I believe you are the representative to the CCAG Finance Subcommittee.
I'm on the finance board. Yes, I am. Yes.
I would, for the sake of continuity and consistency, is it possible for me to take over that role?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you'd like to. We meet once a quarter. It's fairly
right.
It's not heavily, and plus they actually give us a lunch. So yeah, no, that'd be fine. I'll make sure they get. Okay. If you want to do that. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I have one other question.
Sure.
And I'm not sure how directly related it is to this. It is related, but not maybe directly.
Okay.
Is for many years we did have somebody on BPAC. I was Tom Davids was on there, and then after he stepped down, I stepped into the position. I don't think we have anybody from San Carlos on that right now, and
right.
We might want to look into how we could get somebody on there, because it is helpful when it comes to voting for the grant funding and so forth to have a representative.
And we can have a citizen on there too,
as
well as a council member.
It does not have to be an elected official.
When that comes, I think we have to look to see when the next term is up or whatever.
Maybe we could have staff look into that.
Yeah, could we find out when the next thing is up for that one? That would be good. And Mr. Johnson, yes, sir.
There is one redundancy, which is the San Mateo County Community Choice Energy has now been superseded by Peninsula Clean Energy, so we can remove that one.
Okay.
And I'm also listed here as the liaison to San Carlos Green. I think, unfortunately, that group is no longer active.
Okay.
If they reconstitute themselves, I'm happy to be their liaison, but I don't think that they're meeting these days.
So, Crystal, can you make those changes? All right. Any other changes that we have right now? Do we need a motion for this? I guess we do, huh?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the appointments of the City Council subcommittees and ad hoc committees for 2018 as amended by comments made from the dais.
I second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item from the public? All right, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Griselli?
Yes. I want to thank my colleagues. By the way, there's a number of, just for the public's knowledge, we don't just sit here twice a month. We are on at least 2 to 3, if not even 4, other committees that meet sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly, that we represent our city and regional boards and so on. And so I want to compliment my colleagues that we do attend these meetings and represent San Carlos. So thank you. All right, moving on. New business, 8D, consideration of mayor's investigation into the city code of conduct and ethics violations. Is there any kind of a staff report, Mr. Rubens?
Mr. Mayor, I will just commence the staff report and kind of lay the foundation where we are on this. After the November 13th meeting, 14 separate complaints were received from members of the public about the conduct during the meeting by Councilmember Grocott. After an additional investigation by the mayor announced at the December 11th meeting that he thought there may be a potential violation of the code of conduct, and then asked staff to agendize the matter for consideration of hiring an outside investigator to review the matter. An outside investigator would have some cost to the city general fund, and the specific code of conduct violations are laid out in the staff report and in emails attached to the staff report. I won't go into them unless there's any specific questions about those. But the section 15 of the code of conduct is where the mayor has the discretion and drives the process of the investigation. So if the mayor decides that an outside investigator is required or further investigations are required, it's the mayor's call. If the mayor feels that there isn't any need to go further, the mayor can render his findings at that point in time. So the action possibly tonight would be to authorize the hiring of an outside investigator or not to hire an outside investigator.
All right, thank you. Mr. Grocott, did you have something to say?
Well, I have looked at the 14 emails and read through them. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding. Some of the same people who wrote about the possibility of an investigation actually wrote to me and asked me some questions, and I wrote back to them and explained to them some of the impetus for my comments, mostly related to the church, Epiphany Church, and the Reverend Gates, or Pastor Gates. And the people who wrote seemed satisfied with the answers that I gave them. I actually heard from Pastor Gates as well over the holiday break and wrote him a couple of emails. I did not hear back from him, but I assume he's fine with the things that I wrote to him. So I do think there was some misunderstanding in the things that I said and perhaps the way they were said, but I would just welcome the other folks who are on that list who wrote emails if they would write to me directly, as 3 people did. I'd be happy to answer any questions they have.
Okay. Mr. Olbert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question for Mr. Rubens, because I have to admit I don't quite understand. So the policy gives the, let me think of it as the initial investigation responsibility to the mayor, unless the mayor is the person who's named in the complaint, in which case it goes to the vice mayor. And what is, does the mayor have to make it, is it that if the mayor makes a note, says that there's nothing here worth pursuing, at that point, nothing happens? And if something were to happen, like hiring an outside investigator or whatever the additional step is, does the mayor have to make some kind of finding? That's what I'm unclear about. I don't see how that works.
The way the policy works is it has the passive term "may" in the way the policy is worded. So every step of the way, it's the mayor may make a finding that there's a potential violation, and then the mayor, based upon his initial investigation, recommend an outside investigator. So my read of the provisions is that it's intended to give the mayor to be the driver of the investigation, so that it doesn't automatically become something more than it needs to be, to put it in a certain way. Sometimes, and remember, this is a broad policy, so there could be a wide range of issues of conduct that could come before the dais. And so the policy is designed to have some flexibility for the mayor to really drive that and make a decision whether it's serious enough to go to further levels. And the policy has it all the way to reporting to outside agencies and grand juries and such. So it is recognizing that there is a gradients of how these types of violations could be. So that's the way I read it, and I think it makes sense, because we don't want every we could get a complaint and then the mayor investigates. We don't want them all to become big issues that the council has to debate. So I think that makes some sense.
Okay, well, I appreciate you clarifying. I think I understand it. Where I was having difficulty was probably around the word "may." So hypothetically, one could have a situation where a complaint came in and the mayor investigated it, and nothing gets said or done or anything, because it's the mayor may. Okay. Okay, that part was unclear to me. I suppose that there may be an issue in the public's mind about, it's kind of like if you submit the petition and, are you deserving of some kind of response, even if it's, I don't agree with your petition, but okay, so it is May. Thank you.
And I think in the past when these have come up, there have been at least a brief report about the finding. We've done that, I think, at each time that we've had that, so at least that does happen. It is recognized. So,
Yeah, because I mean, that's actually a good point, because I could see a situation where that hypothetical I described, if nothing gets said, then actually sort of the person that the complaint's filed against is left in kind of an awkward position. It's like, well, did I do something wrong or not, right? Okay, but thank you. I don't want to beat the horse to death, but thank you for your explanation.
Mr. Grocott, another comment?
Yeah, per Mark's questions, I remember when I first read through the Code of Ethics, San Carlos City Code of Ethics, when it was drafted or written and we approved it, which was, by the way, the council makeup at that time was Mike King, Don Eaton, Inga Doherty, myself, and I think...
I wasn't there. It was Tom in
It was
2004.
Tom Davis. Yeah, okay. And the, kind of the backstory on that was there was some trouble going on with the council, and so this was drafted by the city attorney's office. I think mostly worked on it. But it was a pretty quick process, and it's been however many years. It's quite a few years back, 14 years, 15 years. I think to, Mark's questions, it leans towards, I think, a time to review the policy and write it in more clear language. In some cases, it's a bit obtuse, and I think having a review of it would not be a bad idea. Now, if that's not really a discussion for tonight, maybe we discuss it at our council retreat or some other time, but those are just my comments in response to Mark's questions.
Thank you. So I have a statement that I prepared for, so there is a finality to it, hopefully a finality. Over the last month, I've completed a preliminary investigation called for in the City Code of Conduct and Ethics. Councilmember Grocott told me in my preliminary investigation that he did not intend to hurt anyone, but was just trying to assert and use what was in hindsight were imperfect, perhaps, examples to support his opinion on the subject matter at that meeting. This is important because sometimes as council members, we can get very passionate about our positions, just like anyone else could. Mr. Grocott was passionate about the issue at hand and tried to express that passion in a way that perhaps offended some folks and could be considered to run afoul of our policy. I do not see how adding a formal investigation, however, would add anything to this matter. And again, after hearing what Councilmember Grocott said here tonight, and given the need to continue moving in a positive direction on the council in the coming year, I have determined that it is not in the best interest of the city to request the City Council authorize the hiring of an independent investigator. I'm hopeful that the council will agree with me on this item and that we should all do our best to uphold the principles of the Code of Conduct and Ethics in future meetings. So that's my statement. Any comments? Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? All right. Okay, so anything else, Mr. Rubens? That would put an end to that one. All right. So moving on, council communications and announcements. 9A. Anyone have any comments? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just say I had the pleasure of filling in for the mayor in cutting the ribbon on the new children's playground at Highlands Park. We'll acknowledge that there's a couple folks in the audience who raised some concerns about that, and we'll get some more information. But it was a great event. I want to commend the staff for their hard work. It's a beautiful park. It was a cold weekend, but the sun kind of came out for a moment, and a lot of kids came out and got to play in the park. And so it was really a privilege to be there. So thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two brief things. One is I wanted to share with my colleagues that I had the pleasure of recognizing what I thought was a significant bit of community engagement on the part of Pastor Alan Gates over the weekend at a potluck lunch that was held after the Feast of the Epiphany service at the Church of the Epiphany, where I presented the pastor with a city coin because, as I said in my remarks at that meeting, I thought he was an outstanding example of a concerned citizen raising his concerns in a constructive and reasonable fashion, and it clearly touched a resonance in the community, and I wanted to see him recognized for that. The other thing I wanted to mention, Crystal, if you could put that picture up. This is a picture, just to give you the context, set behind Blue Line Pizza on Christmas Day. And I happened to notice this just because Barbara and I were walking around downtown. There's two things of significance here. One is obviously the thing that's in the foreground with the trash all over the place. The other, however, is to draw your attention to that little alcove on the right, which is normally, I think, where the trash is kept, and it normally is rolled down and locked. At least other weekends when the restaurant is closed and I've been by there, that's what I've noticed. The reason I want to bring this to the council's attention is because we are spending time talking about what we should do about integrating a potential new plaza in this area with the fact that the property owner from whom Blue Line rents space owns some of the right-of-way right off this sidewalk here that you see. And I am very concerned about us doing something where we build sort of a nice public park or a nice public gathering, kind of like the one further down on Laurel Street, and then we have occasionally to deal with this kind of stuff. I just want to raise everybody's awareness of this. This is, to me, a very non-trivial thing, and this is a pretty serious and egregious situation, which I really hope never gets repeated. But mostly I just want you guys to be aware of that's what we're dealing with when we talk about the risk of doing something in that space.
Okay. I think your point is very well taken there. Mr. Grocott.
Yeah, not anything from the past, but in the future, the council, for the public's knowledge, has a retreat coming up this week, and those start in the morning. And Crystal, where we'll be meeting as
the library conference room.
At the library conference room
on Wednesday.
On Wednesday,
yeah.
I think 8:30.
8:30.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Good. Any other comments? Okay. Staff comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I should have mentioned this to you earlier. I just wanted to mention that I learned only the other day that, I don't know if you're aware of this, Alicia Aguirre's husband passed away.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if we might.
Sure. Mr. Olbert is speaking about a gentleman named Pete Liebengood, who has been in this Bay Area for, 40-plus years, was in the media, was a sports reporter, and also did an awful lot of, after he retired from that, did an awful lot of work with the Sheriff's Athletic League and the Police Athletic League in Redwood City, and was a very strong member of our community, and unfortunately passed away right around Christmas time. So appreciate that comment, and when we get to that point in a minute, we will adjourn in his memory. Mr. Malpe, do you have any comments on staff administrative business or city administrative business?
Nope. Mr. Grocott stole my comment.
Okay. So in that case, we will adjourn. And again, thank you, Mr. Olbert, for mentioning we will adjourn in the memory of Pete Liebengood, who, again, was a terrific member of our community, not necessarily the San Carlos community, but of the San Mateo County community, and did an awful lot in his life to help folks around. Okay, thank you very much. We're adjourned.